comment that is really true for a lot of information that we have when we're seeking to present truth, not just related to health. This is true for any discipline. Arthur Schopenhauer was a German philosopher about 200 years ago, and this is really so crucial. You see it all the time. We see it in politics too. You know, first, all truth goes through three stages. First, it's ridiculed, then it's violently opposed, and we're in that position for many of the things that we're talking about now. And then finally, it's accepted as self-evident, which is where we get to be in most cases. So the drug companies are really responsible for a lot of this information and misinformation, because they basically control the whole system. And collectively, there's about half a dozen of them, and they have about $500 billion a year in sales. And that buys a lot of power and influence. $500 billion a year. And every year, they spend $4 billion in direct-to-consumer advertising. That sounds like a lot, right? But they spend $16 billion. Oh wait, I forgot to tell you, you can't have cell phones in here. Because we've got a really big guy, actually two big guys, are going to take you and escort you out. So right now, everyone look for your cell phones.
Like to start now, or? Everybody turn their cell phones
Yeah,
on?
now, I have mine on because I don't have watches. I'm going to turn my volume way down, so this is my watch for today. So.
There you go, Doc.
All right.
All good.
So they spend $16 billion a year on physician manipulation and mind control.
Wow.
That's $10,000 for every doctor in the country.
Wow.
They control the medias and the journals, and they spend a lot more on certain physicians, some key influencers who are typically tend to be appointed to a lot of the FDA committees, so they make recommendations, and they may be journal editors, so that they're able to essentially brainwash most of the entire system. Now, drugs are not the answer, but we filled, Americans as collectively as a culture, we filled over 4 billion. Boy, I'm just not used to a non-wireless mic. Where is the wireless mic? So $4 billion on prescriptions. That's a lot. And in fact,
4 billion prescriptions.
Oh, 4 billion, that's right. We spent a lot more. It's about 500 billion that we're spending. Thank you for the correction. So, you know, that's one prescription a month for every person in the United States. That sounds like a lot, right? Now, I'm not taking prescription. I've taken prescription in decades. And I bet many of you haven't been taking prescriptions for a long time, right? So someone is taking our prescription. They're taking a lot more than that, right? So it's nasty. It really is. Now, here's the key thing, and I don't really emphasize this too much on the site, but there's been a progressive decrease in the ability for them to sell these things because it becomes more difficult to do it, and their patents are expiring, and it's hard to find new drugs. So now they're shifting over to vaccines. And there's 200 vaccines in the pipeline now.
Wow.
200 new ones. Who could, is there any way we could like unslant that? I can see, sir. All right, now agribusiness is another one. This is, you know, it's the drug companies are one, but then we have the agricultural industry, and they're spending 70. Antibiotics is an important issue. 70% of all antibiotics used in the United States are used for animals. 70%. Wow. So when you have that dramatic influence of drugs into the system, that causes antibiotic resistance and a whole variety of things. And actually, there was an article published, or a study published just this last week, that showed that MRSA resistors, methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, actually the incidence increases dramatically when you are vitamin D deficient. So if you have vitamin D, you actually create antibiotic-resistant strains. Now, pesticides are another big issue. And you know how most pesticides work? What the active toxic metal in pesticides is? It's fluoride. So fluoride is a common ingredient. This is another way that we get fluoride in our system. And we use enough pesticides in this country to give a 3-pound bag for every single person in the country every year. One of the reasons why you want to shop organic. It's 1 billion pounds every year. I got that thing on Christmas. 1 billion pounds every year. And interestingly, for the agricultural the agro marketing community, they spend, for every dollar they're spending on food, telling kids that it's good for them, they're spending $500 on junk food advertising. So it's a little bit lopsided. And we spent last year as a culture $65 billion on diet aids and $130 billion on fast food. We got a problem. And $30 billion on vegetables.
Wow.
A little bit lopsided. Now there's a lot of ways, I've got a lot of slides here, and I'm going to be speeding through some of them. But one of the most important ways, there's a lot of different elements that goes into optimizing your health and making sure that you take control of your health. But clearly one of the most important is an emotional wounding that has not been resolved as a child. The single most important thing, there's nothing that comes closer to magic that I've ever seen in my years as a physician and taking care of people that addressing this single issue. So almost all of us have this, especially before the age of 6. And if you have any chronic degenerative disease or autoimmune disease specifically, this needs to be addressed if you want to get healthy. So epigenetics is something that Bruce Lipton has popularized, a really great guy. I can't talk any louder without jeopardizing my vocal cords. So maybe you can turn up the volume, Paul. So Bruce Lipton is a really good guy that helped popularize a concept that we actually can control, regulate our genes. See, we're not dictated by our genetics, because you can actually turn your genes on and off. That's epigenetics, external to the genes that regulates it, and emotions are the most powerful way to do that. Kind of like vitamin D can do that too. It's an epigenetic influencer. Prayer is a good example. It's a little bit too high, Paul. Meditation would be another. And then energy psychology, which is what I use in our practice and I recommend. We have typically recommend EFT, but now we recommend MTT, meridian tapping techniques. And it's a very powerful tool. If you're not using that, then I strongly recommend looking at it. But there's a very important study that I put on the site about 8 years ago now. It was multi-center, published in one of the most prestigious journals in the world, double-blind, placebo-controlled, and it showed that a placebo surgery where they actually did an intervention to correct someone's knees. They did a fake surgery where they actually did the arthroscopy, made the injection for it, but they didn't do anything. And they did it on another group of patients where they actually did the arthroscopy. And there was no difference. There was no difference. Now, did that mean that the surgery didn't work? No, these people clearly did get better. They weren't making it up. But it just is a powerful demonstration. And it doesn't really get any better, this type of powerful proof. It's one of the most powerful demonstrations of how effective your mind can be in precipitating healing. And this was done in a traditional setting. This was not done by alternative healers. All right, so what's the single most important physical factor that speeds up your aging? I said, now we just talked about the mental, so you can't say that, right? Physical. Dehydration. Sugar is partially getting there, but it's not. Is dehydration? No. Children, that's the answer. That's it. That's why I never had children. Any reason? True. Actually, it's insulin. Insulin is key, and then the subversion of this would be leptin. Leptin is probably even more important, but insulin, they'll pretty much. So you got to keep your fasting insulin levels low. So the way to do this is to avoid sugar. And I've been talking about this, and it's not a mystery. You've all heard it since you were growing up that sugar's not good for you. But I've got information that's been on the site recently that I've never shared before in public, in person, that gets much more specific than this. But insulin roller coaster, let's give you an idea of this. Now, if we were to take your blood, all the blood, and suck it out of your body, we'd have about a gallon. A gallon of blood. We have it up here. And we have say we had an instrument to magically remove every last microgram of sugar in her blood. How much sugar would be in her blood? Is it like a pint? They said, like 2 pints? She got a gallon. How much sugar is in her blood?
2 quarts.
2 quarts. Anyone else guess anything else? Who said a teaspoon? Who said a teaspoon? You? You said a teaspoon? Does that seem right? No. How could you possibly say a teaspoon? That's the right answer. That is the right answer. It's a mere teaspoon. That's it. And guess what happens if you go up to a tablespoon of sugar in that blood? You're dead. You go into a hyperglycemic coma.
Wow.